Want to go far in business and in life? You can't do it alone. The secret is expanding your network of personal relationships, building friendships, connecting on an intimate level, away from the office, over a coffee or cocktail. Welcome to All In with the real Nate Payo. The show that asks what happens when you go all in and leverage the power of your network of personal relationships.
Hello and welcome to the All In podcast with Nate Payo. I am your host, Nate Payo. Today I'm joined by Sam Morris, the CEO and founder of the Unbreakable Man Project. How are you doing, Sam?
I'm good, Nate. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So Sam and I connected via LinkedIn, and I came across his profile talking about really slaying mental health for men, or teaching men to slay mental health. Mental dragons. Sorry, I kind of messed that up. But what intrigued me about it is two things. One is I've been in this place where I've been sober curious about what that looks like, not drinking. And people, when I started being sober, I started talking a little bit about it, and people were coming up to me saying, hey, I'm in the same boat as you. I don't necessarily have this rock bottom relationship with alcohol, but I feel like it's consuming me a little bit. And over the course of like those conversations, I was kind of like, hey, there needs to be more attention brought up that if you have an inappropriate relationship with alcohol, that you can bring light, you can talk about it, you don't have to suffer in silence. But also along the way, I think partly the alcohol use I was doing and other things had led to some depression and anxiety that I wasn't sure how to deal with, especially as a man, because we're taught, as a young age, like there's some dirt on it, don't cry, just tough it up, be a man about things. So when we face mental health challenges, we don't always know where to go seek out help. We don't know what to do about it, and we kind of ignore it or push it down. So I think that's something that I've also been struggling with, was kind of like dealing with it. And I think it just needs to be brought more to the forefront that you shouldn't have to suffer in silence, because one, you shouldn't have to suffer. You should be able to go out and find some help. But two, when you bring a voice to your own personal story, it's making others realize that they're not alone, that they too can reach out and find somebody to talk to, connect to, and that when you're more vocal about it, you're more authentic about it. It's really an example set that others can reach out and find some help too. So thanks for again for coming on the show, Sam. I hope I got our introduction correct there.
I think we're good.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Well, yeah. So the Unbreakable Man Project, what led you to found that? What's kind of the story behind it? What are you looking to help people do?
Well, so how I came about it. So when I was drinking, when I was an alcoholic, full-blown alcoholic, to say reckless would be a vast understatement. I had experienced everything from, I was arrested 15 times. I fell off a balcony 35 feet. Ooh. Got hit by a car on my bike one time. I survived cancer twice. There was like other little things, like I broke my elbow, hit my head, like all these things. And around the same time, I saw the movie Unbreakable with Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson, and I took on kind of the character of being unbreakable. I walked away from all these terrible physical injuries. So it was a really physical, really reckless approach that I had to this unbreakable, this word unbreakable. And I would say, like, I'm unbreakable, and so as I got sober, it turned into much more of an intangible kind of mental health thing about the human spirit and the human will. And so, when I got sober in 2012 was my last drink, I had to look at a lot of things, social anxiety being the first one that popped up for me. And that was social anxiety was a huge reason why I would continue to drink and continue to relapse. I just had this fear of social situations, and that lubricant provided me a way out. So that was the first kind of domino to fall for me as far as overcoming my drinking, was social anxiety. And then a few years after that, depression kicked in. So I removed the alcohol layer, which was a problem. I removed the social anxiety layer, which was a big problem. And then I got down to the bottom layer of it all, which was depression. And it wasn't the first time of my depression. It was my first time sober, though. And I thought, I had this idea in my head that once I got sober, it was going to be all puppies and rainbows, and it just wasn't. I was, it was 2017, so I was probably a good 4 years sober, solid 4 years sober, and I had a great job, personal training in San Francisco, living in a great city, great girlfriend, great job, making a lot of money, and I fell into it. I fell into the depression, and I just couldn't figure out what was wrong. I blamed it on the weather. I blamed it on the city. I blamed it on a lot of things except for the fact that I was just depressed. And so walking through all this, I looked back and I still had this kind of internal dialogue about, the unbreakable and being really super resilient and relentless. And as I went from personal training to life coaching, and I started off in sobriety coaching, and then it morphed into helping guys overcome mental illness. And I realized that what it really takes is an unbreakable will, an unbreakable spirit. And that I had that all along. Growing up, I was really sick with severe asthma and really, really extensive food allergies. So that contributed a lot to my social anxiety. But just looking back, I had a lot of examples of, yes, the physical resilience, but I also had a lot of examples of just being a resilient person. And so I'm not saying I'm some sort of superhero or some sort of, just unbreakable man. It's more of a less physical, more internal conversation, way of being that just is like, we all have this unbreakable spirit in us. Everyone says, I feel so broken. And I'm just like, you're never broken. There are bends, like we do bend, but we never truly break. And so when people can kind of realize that there is this unbreakable spirit inside of them, it just gets overlooked. And so when I moved out of the personal training into the life coaching, I just said that I wanted to help every man that I can find the unbreakable spirit, overcome the depression, slay the mental dragons, however you want to say it, and just be in that the state of an unbreakable man, which is to say that they are unwavering and solid and, masculine and feminine and all the things that go into being a man and creating space in the world for men to do that went into founding the Unbreakable Man Project.
So you're pretty vocal about your dealing with depression personally and your personal story. Mm-hmm. Is that something that other men relate to and they reach out to you? Or like, what do most people come to you with, like saying, hey, I need some help and advice and I'm not sure where to begin?
Yeah, it's, depression is a funny thing because it's one of those, it's a scary word. It's a big word. There's a bit of defeat in saying I'm depressed. And so as men, it's really hard, and as women too, but as men, like we have this thing in us that's built from, we're about the same age. So our generation came from a generation before it of pull yourself up by your bootstraps, throw some dirt on it, as you said. And so to say that, and even for me to say I'm an alcoholic, is there's a surrender in there and there's a defeat in there. But it's one of those things that like you have to let go of the stigma around it. You have to, like when I thought alcoholic, I thought guy living under a bridge with a shopping cart. Mm-hmm. And that was my idea of an alcoholic. It wasn't some guy that had a good commercial real estate broker job, living in an apartment in Miami. Like all these things that I had didn't line up with my idea of alcoholic. And so until I could admit that I had this alcoholism going on, there's no recovering from it. So with men and depression, it comes down to like it's viewed as a huge weakness. It's a stigma out there. And so men will come to me with just relating to my story. They won't come out and just say like, hey, I'm depressed, but they'll say, oh my God, like the way you spoke about it, I've never heard, or the way you touched on this subject or that metaphor that you made really, really struck a chord in me. And I realized that, I'm suffering from a lot of the same things. Like, what's the first step? How does this look? Where do I go from here? And then it comes down to a lot of people, like the way that I can relate it to a lot to it is between the anxiety and depression, a lot of guys, the way I felt like it was a swarm of bees in my head. It was just nonsense and obsessive thinking and buzzing and just a constant, there's no escape from it. Mm-hmm. And so that's a really big thing for a lot of guys is that they feel that weight and that buzz in their head constantly and then the first thing I always work on is just getting that, I kind of just like take the top off and just release the bees. Mm-hmm. And so that's a huge thing that guys will come to me. It's just, and again, it's not the depression so much, like until they remove all the noise, then you can really look at like what's going on.
Yeah, I've personally felt that when I feel like anxiety or a depression set in, like it'll feel, to me, it feels very much like I'm being compressed, and it feels a little bit like I'm being, in a sense, a little bit painful. But then I'll start having thoughts in my head that the rational part of me goes, those are like thoughts that like you shouldn't have, and if you brought them up, people might lock you up or something like that. But then I've started becoming a bit more conscious about it. Like, oh shit, those thoughts that are in my head, like I know something's up. I'm either like out of whack a little bit chemically, or I'm not sleeping good, or something's causing me to feel this way. And I could maybe make some corrections to it. But like you said, once you start kind of like releasing the top and start looking for help and finding out like, what are your whys? Why do you feel this way? You start asking yourself some of those questions. You're able to kind of start, even it out a little bit. So you're not in this like super pressure. Cause sometimes I went to a therapist for a while, and I would be in this depressed state, and then say, okay, I want to go to an appointment, but they can't see you for 3 weeks. And then by the time like the third week comes and you go, I got my appointment, like, I don't even feel that way anymore. Like, why do I want to go? Like, I'm not going to go. Like, screw it. I'm kind of busy and whatever. I don't need to do it. So that it's kind of been this revolving cycle for a lot of years of my life where I would go seek out some help, go for a bit, stop going. And then a lot of it had to do with how often, how much I was drinking. And like, I could numb it, self-medicate with some alcohol, take a break for a while. But every time I also started self-medicating, I think the alcohol would trigger more depression, and maybe I'd numb it for like this brief period of time, but it would come in the middle of the night, or it'd come in the morning, come in the day, and it just would constantly build up. So I think that's a really good way to describe it, the bees in the head, and I hadn't heard it before that way. So
yeah, it's another thing that is, like you say, the revolving door. I run into that a lot with a lot of my clients. Is there's a couple things. It's either been like a low level buzz for many, many years, or it comes in serious, huge waves where they're good, and then 3 or 4, maybe 5 years will go by, and they'll have another 6 month or a year bout with depression. And it's because, like you said, like you call up a therapist, be like, hey, I'm freaking out. I need to get in. Can't get in for 3 weeks. So what are you going to do in those 3 weeks? You're going to treat the symptoms. You're either going to drink through it, do drugs through it, have sex through it, shop through it, something to do to just like relieve the pressure a little bit. When in reality, what it really takes is a consistent approach to get past when it all started. Because once you get into that spin cycle of the cycle of depression, every time the depression comes back, it might look a little different, but I bet you the basic templates or the basic pillars of it are the same. Like it's either the same trigger or the same experience or the same duration or the same. There's similarities in all the cycles of it. And until we can get past treating the symptoms and get into treating the root cause, it's going to keep coming back around. And that's the way it was for me. Like until I got to the root story of why I kept falling prey to heartbreak and depression, it kept going and going and going until you break the cycle.
Is depression something that can be cured, or is it just something you just become better accustomed to managing and controlling or adjusting to life with?
Cured is a very strong word. Depression is something that you can live without. It can be, in remission, kind of like alcoholism. Like I say, I'm a recovered alcoholic. Like alcoholism is not a problem for me anymore. That being said, if I stop addressing my alcoholism, if I stop doing things daily to combat that, it will sure as shit come back. Depression, anxiety are the same way. You can get them to a point like I don't think about drinking anymore. I haven't thought about drinking in 7 years. I haven't had a problem. I don't have a problem going into a bar. I don't have a problem. I go on a golf trip with my buddies every year, and they drink till 2 a.m. I have no problem hanging out with them. Like it's not an issue for me. Depression, they're not issues for me anymore. But I know that it takes a little bit of effort for me, and it takes a little bit of work for me to keep it that way. Mm-hmm. So I don't fear depression coming back. I don't fear social anxiety coming back. I don't have any thoughts of it at all. But to say that if I feel it's not beneficial, it would not benefit me to say I can stop doing everything I've done to overcome it and expect it to stay away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd agree with that. When I've stopped drinking, a lot of stuff will come into my mind of like an idea or like for example, like a beer with a hamburger or wine with a glass of pizza, or like you said, you're going to a certain event and there's going to be alcohol there, and that's one that you go, geez, I'm going to go this thing. And the industry I'm in is construction. There's tons of networking events. I mean, obviously not right now with everything going on, but in the past there always was. There's always an open bar, and there's this idea of like you're going to grab a drink, you're going to go to the bar, you can get a drink, you'll walk around with the drink, you might have two, you might have three. And a lot of times I'd go like, hey, I'm going to go this one, and I'm just going to have one or two. And then next thing I know, like I'm the last one at the bar with everybody. And I'm like, geez, I never got into like, well, I can't say never because I have had a DUI, but I didn't ever feel like I hit this rock bottom place where like I was destitute, couldn't show up for work on the next day, was like losing relationships and jobs, and people felt me passed up my yard, which a lot of people identify, oh, that's an alcoholic. But I was like definitely consuming more than I wanted to. And I was wanting it. Like if I did it today, I'd want it tomorrow, and I'd want it the next day. So I started kind of realizing like, hey, I need to make better decisions. And then when I would eliminate it from my life, I'd be like, I feel so much better. Yeah. But there would be like one little event would be like, okay, I'll just gonna have a beer at this event, and then boom, right back to the same bad habits, and then the depression would kick in. So I think it's hard for a lot of people, and they don't really want to admit that they, like you said, you don't identify with being an alcoholic, so you don't want to go reach out and make that choice to like, hey, I should quit drinking, even though it makes you feel better when you stop, and it kind of helps with some of the depression triggers that you feel.
Yeah. So, I mean, I went to rehab many times, and they always, the disease concept is there's users, abusers, and then addicts. Mm-hmm. And if you fall in, like the user can just basically have a drink, put it down, have a half a drink, put it down. The abuser will go hard, but they can, if something serious comes up in their life, a girl or relationship, medical something or other comes up, they can stop too. The addict is the one that powers through all that stuff, and no matter what, will always drink. And so I had a struggle for me for a long time because I controlled it for the better part of, I mean, looking back, there was less and less control as I look back, but during it, from age 23 to 33, I had a pretty decent control on it. There was definitely some wild times, but at 33, the wheels fell off. And so I always thought back to like, well, I controlled it for this many years. Why can't I do that again? Mm-hmm. And the thing is that once it's gone, it's gone. Once it's like they use an analogy in recovery. It's once a cucumber becomes a pickle, it can never be a cucumber again. And that's the way it is with an alcoholic. And so, one of the things that one of the biggest tools in my toolbox is play the tape forward. Cause I still like, it still looks fun to me to, on a nice day, have a drink outside on the street or, on the balcony or the patio, whatever. But I know that like the likelihood of it ending there for me is not so high. I'm likely to end up in the hospital or jail.
Yeah. That's where I've been learning to go, is this idea of like, I used alcohol, like you said, as a lubricant to be this socially well-balanced person. Like I could function at a party. I could be outside my comfort zone. I could be, a lot more outgoing. And I probably started drinking when I was 15, 16. So I was always at parties, and that always kind of like took the shyness out of me. Mm-hmm. And so now I've been trying to like identify like, hey, that person I wanted to be, it was always within me. I didn't need alcohol to bring that person out. Like I can be that person that's outgoing and forward and fun and can stay out till, 2:00 at night with their friends and have a good time without using alcohol to be there. Mm-hmm. And I think that's helpful when you start identifying with yourself as being this other person. You start leaving that other one behind, and it becomes a little bit easier every time you go into that place of like, hey, I'm more of this person than that person. Then you're right. You play it forward. You go, I know where that person's going to go. I know what the end of that road looks like. I'm going to go down this road and choose not to drink. So, what is it like to work with you? What do people find to expect if they said, hey, I want to slay my mental dragons, like help me out? What does that look like?
So it's kind of an undefined process in a sense that every situation is different. I have a couple things that I'll take clients through at first, but my big thing is that we're going to stop treating symptoms right now. Mm-hmm. This is not a Band-Aid. The days of Band-Aids on bullet holes for this are over. This is like, we're going to get right into, and I ask my clients, I said, are you open to hearing some shit that might rock you a little bit? Are you willing to look at some stuff that you have been avoiding for a long time? Because if you really want this to be gone, if you really want to be past this, we have to look at some stuff way back. Like everyone wants to go to like the three most recent years or 5 most recent years, like when one thing triggered them, and they hang on to that thought that this is what caused it. When in reality, the most recent, it's kind of like my point is the most recent event is not the cause of the depression. It's something much deeper, much further back that triggered it. It's a story that we've been telling ourselves about us, about the world, about other people that we hang on to and then manifest in our lives. So a lot of times I was a personal trainer, and you find like people are always complaining about lower back pain. Mm-hmm. Lower back pain is very rarely actually lower back pain. It's more likely a hip flexor problem, a hamstring problem, or even like a bottom of the foot problem. It can just ease its way up to lower back, and that's the lower back is what takes the brunt of everything. So the lower back gets tired, and depression is the same way. You could say, "Oh, this girl broke up with me, and it threw me into this depression." And the fact of the matter is like that girl. Yes, that heartbreak is terrible and it sucks, but there's no way that it should throw you into a 3-year depression. What is it about that event that triggered something deep from long ago in you? So with my clients, we're going to get to the bottom of it right away. Stop treating this. The symptoms will always come up: the getting out of bed, the lack of motivation, the lack of momentum, the lack of purpose, all these feelings of not enough, the bees in the head, the obsessive conversations. Those things can be treated with a number of things, from Xanax to weed to cocaine. I mean, you name it, you can treat that symptom any way you want. But nothing is going to change until we treat the root. So we're getting right to the root is the first thing we do. And then once we get to the root of the problem, it becomes impossible to live that way anymore. Once you're aware of the real problem, you're going to see it everywhere in your life. It's going to pop up here. It's going to pop up there. You're like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that for so long. Why was I doing that? Because you had this story that it's like a little baby. You love this little story and it fit your life. And then consequently, you started fitting your life into that story to make it comfortable for you. And so once you iron out all that stuff and pull out all the wrinkles there, then it becomes impossible to live that way anymore. And that's when you free yourself up. Like, okay, like now that I see all this, like what do I do? And this is when we design the life. We design, okay, what do you want in 6 months or a year or 3 or 5 years? Like, where do you want to be? Because this isn't going to be a problem for you anymore. Mm-hmm. So get out of like the limiting beliefs, get out of the limiting self-belief that this is all that I'm capable of, or this is all that I deserve, or this is all that was ever meant for me. No, like we've changed the game now. Now you have, the sky is the limit. Like, what have you always wanted? So one of the first things I send my clients, like after they sign up with me, is I send them an assignment of, I make them list 101 things that they've always wanted in their life. And it's, and I'm like, this goes literally anything. And I tell them, I'm not even, you're going to send this to me, but I'm not going to look at it until we're at least 6 weeks into the program, because basically what I want you to do is just think outside your little box for a little bit. Mm-hmm. Put the ideal frame on it, and just go into like what has always been on the back of your mind. And so then we get in, then it gives them a little motivation, and then we start building the ideal life one routine at a time, one habit at a time, one day at a time. We just start doing things, nothing big, no huge, divergence from path they're already on, because that sets up expectations and failures. So it's basically building a bridge across a raging river, right? So they're on one side of the river, their ideal life is on the other. Let's build the bridge. And then the third phase is basically it's freedom. It's like, how do we live this life in a free way that it's not like me? Like, how do I live a life that as someone that battled depression 3 times, alcoholism for 15 years, social anxiety for 40 years? Mm-hmm. How do you live now free of all that stuff? And that's when we implement all the tools. I have a few methods, a few things I developed to combat the daily stuff. Yeah.
I think getting that first step forward is probably the most challenging for most men. what would a question be that somebody should ask themselves and say, is this right for me? Do I have a problem, or how do you know, like, somebody once told me, like, if you're questioning your relationship with alcohol, like, most people that don't have a problem with alcohol don't question their relationship with alcohol. So, like, how do you know mentally, like, am I depressed, or am I just kind of like just not having a good day? Like, how do I know the difference? Or really, should I be seeking out some help and sort of ask the questions like, could my life be better, or is it just a moment in time?
So the more you go through life, you have to look at similarities, right? So like you said, like, yeah, if you think you have a problem with alcohol, you probably do. Like, normal people don't think, oh, I might have a problem with alcohol. So people that don't have the mental illness will like a bad day, for example, even for me, years recovered from the depression, years recovered from the anxiety. Like, when I have a bad day, it's going to hit me a little differently than everyone has bad days. Mm-hmm. But the people that don't have the depressive tendencies, or the social anxiety, or just the anxiety, generalized anxiety, they just move on and they say, okay, it's just one of those days, like, no big deal. The people that are depressed or anxious will hang on to that and turn it into a bad week or a bad month or a bad few years. So one thing to notice is, like, first of all, when the bad days come up, what do you notice yourself doing? Do you notice yourself running, drinking, shopping, hopping on Tinder? Like, what do you find yourself doing when these things come up? Are you able to sit with it? Second of all, what's the duration and the severity of it? Like, how deep do you go and how long does it last? And then the third thing would be, like, how does this look like a previous time in my life? Like, because I guarantee you, if you're over the age of 25, you've felt the same thing a couple times. If you're in that boat, it's not the first time that you felt something. Like, it's hard. I mean, as a teenager and stuff, like, as we're growing and evolving, like, we learn things. But once you get to the age of about 25 or 30, you can look at repetitive things, like I call them the always outcomes. Like, how does this always turn out for me? A relationship always ends in heartbreak. A job always ends in me quitting. A job, whatever it is. Like, you can look at similarities in a lot of events. So the first thing that I would say to someone that thinks they might be struggling with mental illness is to look at, one is, like, how long do you sit in that bad day? And second of all, what is your immediate reaction to that bad day? Is it immediately to escape, or is it, this is just a bad day?
Yeah. I have two last questions for you, but the one I'm interested to know is, you talked about a lot of bad choices, a lot of challenges, like times in your life where other people might have died, or you might have killed yourself. Like, you fell off a building and you survived that, and you made a lot of poor choices drinking alcohol. Do you think in some way that, like, because, like, you're to this point in life where you went through those things, where it could have very, very easily been a life-ending event for yourself or for somebody else, or massively hurt somebody, but because that didn't happen, that you're actually called, like, you're called to be out of that life and say, hey, look, you're destined for bigger things. You're destined to have more of an impact on people's lives. So, like, it's time to quit messing around and take your talents and use them for what you're called to do.
Yeah, that's one thing that became clear to me when I finally stopped drinking. When I stopped drinking, it was the end of a 2-month bender. I had been in jail for 7 nights. I lost my dog. I went to the hospital 4 times. DUI. It was just like a drug dealer broke into my house, and it was 4 a.m. and I just said, I'm done. Like, this is the end for me. And then from there, I started, like, acting from a place of purpose. I felt one, like I was starting over, which was hard. Like, I had to allow myself to be a beginner, which is never an easy thing, but it's something I tell everyone to do every day. But it became clear to me that, and through the personal training and then on to life coaching, I have not once thought, like, my end game was to be a mental health coach for men. Like, that just showed up on my door. It showed up through my evolution of me becoming clear on my purpose. And yes, all the things that I've went through, like, from the childhood asthma to the childhood allergies, the social anxiety, the fear of the world, all the stories I told myself, the heartbreak, the depression, the anxiety, all that stuff I went through, to pay it forward and to help other men to walk through that with grace. And as I've gotten more and more sober, it's become more and more clear, that is what I'm here. That's my purpose on this planet.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So where can somebody find you? Where's that place if they wanted to reach out, had questions about getting started, want to just, hey, have a conversation with you and chit chat, or actually just start your program? Where would they find you to connect with you?
The best place is on LinkedIn. Just my name, Sam Morris. You'll see me. I'm wearing a cowboy hat in my picture. It's easy to pick out. The second best place is just send an email to info@themanunbreakable.com. And I'll send you out some free resources to check out, or we can just hop on a call.
Yeah.
Just send me a DM. I'm always open to communicating and talking about this stuff.
Okay. Well, I think you've got a powerful story, and you're doing amazing things to help men, especially deal with something that a lot of us don't know how to get started treating. They don't even know if they have a problem, and they don't realize there's this thing, because I grew up with allergies too, is sometimes you just think that that's normal. It should feel this way to be normal. And then when you start treating your allergies and you go, oh my God, this is what it's supposed to feel like to breathe normally, to not have to be wheezing, to be able to run a little ways without catching your breath. You're like, this is what it should feel like. And I think when you start getting in that place where you're dealing with your alcohol or dealing with your depression, you start feeling like, wow, this is what life should feel like, and it makes you want to chase that more. So I think your message is important to get out there. I think more people need to hear it, and it shouldn't be this kind of got this thing going on now in my head where it's like Alcoholics Anonymous shouldn't be as anonymous as it used to be. It should be a little bit more forefront that like says, hey, we all deal with our own issues, and it shouldn't be as a secret that we're treating it, and it should be something we shy away from because we don't want to admit that we might have a problem that we can't handle on our own.
Yeah, I think the thing about Alcoholics Anonymous, it's for the other people. It's not for the person. Like with my recovery, I've been pretty open with it always, but it's really about other people might not be so much. So the anonymous stuff is not. It's about the other person more so than it is the actual person. Everyone that I know is pretty much open about their recovery. If you knew me from 1990 to 2012, you knew I was an alcoholic. So if you know me now, you know that I was one and I'm not anymore. So I think that like anybody that can be open about it, it's just sharing the message. It's experience, strength, and hope, and it proves that it can be done. Yeah. And then you said it so well with like knowing what 100% really is. Like I had the same thing. Dairy was one thing for me. I ate it until I was 35, and I just loved milk and ice cream. And so then I stopped eating it, and my lung capacity went up, and I felt better. And I was like, "This is what normal is," So, it's a great metaphor with it, comparing that to alcohol, because it's so true. Once you clear the way, it's amazing what the possibilities are.
Fantastic, awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on my show, and we'll get the word out and try to help as many people as we can here.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Make sure to visit our website, therealnatepeo.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, so you'll never miss an episode of All In. While you're at it, if you found value, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if simply tell 2 friends about the show. Looking to connect? You can find Nate Peo on LinkedIn or Instagram.